of the beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you this, my friend. Is this the end of the beginning or beginning of the end? Is this the end of the beginning? I'll ask you, my friend. Is this the end of the beginning?
It is January 18th, 2018. This is the Watchman News, and I'm Mike Callahan. So here's a term that we haven't heard in a little while, mainly because the groups of people that were supporting it has pretty much been laughed out of the circle of science, so to speak. So now we hear terms like climate change in place of global warming. Well, an article came out that I posted on the site today. I'll put the link down in the description, talking about that global warming. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Worst case global warming scenarios not credible, says a study. You don't say. Let's see. Okay. Earth's surface will almost certainly not warm up 4 or 5 degrees Celsius by 2100, according to a study released Wednesday, which, if correct, voids worst-case UN climate change predictions. A revised calculation of how greenhouse gases drive up the planet's temperature reduces the range of possible end-of-century outcomes by more than half, researchers said in a report published by the journal Nature. Our study all but rules out very low and very high climate sensitivities, said lead author Peter Cox, a professor at the University of Exeter. How effectively the world slashes CO2 and methane emissions, improves energy efficiency, and develops technologies to remove CO2 from the air will determine whether climate change remains manageable or unleashes a maelstrom of human misery. But uncertainty about how hot things will get also stems from the inability of scientists to nail down a very simple question. By how much will Earth's average surface temperature go up if the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is doubled? That known unknown is called equilibrium climate sensitivity. And for the last 25 years, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the ultimate authority on climate science, has settled on a range of 1.5 degrees Celsius to 4.5 degrees Celsius. That would be 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit to 8.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Cox and colleagues, using a new methodology, have come up with a far narrower range, 2.2 degrees Celsius to 3.4 degrees Celsius, with the best estimate of 2.8 degrees Celsius or 5 Fahrenheit. If accurate, it precludes the most destructive doomsday scenarios. These scientists have produced a more accurate estimate of how the planet will respond to increasing CO2 levels, said Piers Forster, director of the Priestley International Center for Climate at the University of Leeds. Gabby Hergel, a climate scientist at the University of Edinburgh, who said, like Foster, did not take part in the research, added, having lower probability for a very high sensitivity is reassuring. Very high sensitivity would have made it extremely hard to limit climate change according to the Paris targets. Pressure still on. The landmark Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 called for capping global warming at well under 2 degrees Celsius compared to a pre-industrial benchmark and pursuing efforts for a 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling. The findings should not be seen as taking pressure off the need to tackle climate change, the authors and other experts warned. We will still see significant warming and impacts this century if we don't increase our ambition to reduce CO2 emissions, said Forster. Even a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase will have consequences. With a single degree Celsius of warming so far, the Earth is already coping with the crescendo of climate impacts, including deadly droughts, erratic rainfall, and storm surges engorged by rising seas. And yes, now I know I'm mispronouncing some of these words. Let's see. A 3.5 degrees Celsius world, scientists say, could pull at the fabric of civilization. You know how hard it is to keep, focused on an article when you keep seeing Celsius? I don't know Celsius. I know like 0 Celsius, it's like freezing. 100 Celsius, it's like boiling, if I'm correct. But, yeah, I will go with the standard method of measurement just because it's much harder than the Celsius scale. Anyway, continuing on. Cox and colleagues instead considered the year-to-year fluctuations in global temperature, said Richard Allen, a climate scientist at the University of Reading. By analyzing the responsiveness of short-term changes in temperature to nudges and bumps in the climate system, he explained, they were able to exclude the outcomes that would have resulted in devastating increases of 4 degrees Celsius or more by 2100. One wild card not taken into consideration by the new model is the possibility of rapid shifts in climate brought on by the planet itself. There is indeed evidence that the climate system can undergo abrupt changes or tipping points, Cox told AFP. The collapse of the Gulf Stream, the thawing of carbon-rich permafrost, or the melting of ice sheets on Greenland and Antarctica, any of these could quickly change the equation and not in the Earth's favor. And it's very interesting that that's mentioned because, to be real honest with you, what is causing the climate change is a weakening shield. A weakening magnetic shield, okay? And in connection with that is that collapse of that Gulf Stream, okay? So those are the two biggest players in what we call climate change, or what is truthfully described as climate change. Folks, it's not cow flatulence. It's not, it's not a lot of the reasons that they're trying to tax you, okay? What's causing it, for the most part, is something that we can't stop, we can't control, okay? Now, I'm not saying we should continue on polluting the world. Absolutely not. We need to take care of that. In fact, I'm very much in support of weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels. But, this whole blaming it on things so that you can come up with an excuse to control and tax people, that's just not good. Just not good. But at least some scientists apparently are staying alive long enough to get their reports out.